guys weren't listening, this was not part of the show, but given the newness of this news, I figure this is the perfect thing to start with here. And I think it drives home a larger point that I think is worth making here. If you didn't hear CBS Newsmax at the top of the hour there, Joe Kent, who has spent the last part of his life as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, has officially announced his resignation as a result of the war in Iran and the reasons behind it. He has a lengthier statement out that you can easily search online, but I would like to read a direct comment from him along with the post that he made. After much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. It has been an honor serving under POTUS and Tulsi Gabbard, and leading the professionals at the NCTC. May God bless America. Now, I have a feeling you're going to see Joe Kent's name in a lot of places. He might do a little bit of media rounds here and there because it'll obviously fit a narrative. I didn't know much about him before this news ended up breaking about what he did. But this goes to show you, and this isn't, I'm not saying anything about the National Counterterrorism Center specifically, but I think if you've listened to this show with any kind of even quasi frequency, you know that I struggle trusting the 3 and 4 letter acronym groups that are in our government, our FBI's, our CIA's, so on and so forth, because I don't always know that their agenda conforms to what the American population would like to see happen. Hammer sees every problem like a nail, fit in whatever cliche you'd like to about that. But that ultimately is where I kind of settle on it. In terms of the brass, the people making the decisions, the nuts and bolts of those agencies, the people that get involved to actually improve life and keep Americans safe, I do believe that makes up a large percentage of the groups that comprise our government. It's just when bad leadership takes over, when you're told to spy on Americans, when you're told to focus on certain groups, it's easy to kind of just paint over entire agencies with a broad brush. And it's people like Joe Kent here, who, let's be real, just a preliminary reading of his background. He's a father and husband, retired Green Beret, combat vet, Gold Star husband, so on and so forth. That doesn't come without a lot of effort and work. And to be able to walk away from it, it's very easy to sit there not in that position in your life and say, why aren't people walking away? It's easy to think you would walk away. I'd like to think that I would. I say it about this industry all the time. If I got the talking to and it was like, actually, Ben, turns out you have to do a show now that says ICE is great and Donald Trump doesn't make any mistakes, I'd probably just go get a new job. And it's not like you can just go get a new job in media. There's a good chance I'd be out of the industry entirely, at least for a little bit. What Joe Kent decided to do here was throw away years worth of dedication towards an agency because he could tell the trajectory was on was one that he did not want his name to be associated with. And you really have to respect the hell out of that kind of decision. It takes guts, and clearly he didn't have anything angry to say about leadership. This is about the leanings of why he believed this war happened, a belief that is fairly prevalent, especially since Marco Rubio said as much 2 days after the bombing started, that essentially we got involved with this because we knew Israel was going to get involved in it. Joe Kent decides that's enough for him. And I really don't have much to say about it beyond that, but I do think it is important to highlight that there are people that do the right things in these kind of scenarios. And I oftentimes do question how successful resigning from these kind of positions really are, because I personally would rather have somebody that objects to what's happening, that will view movements forward with a clear head and clear eyes. But if even in an elevated position like the director of National Counterterrorism Center, even if that individual really doesn't have much say in the path forward, well, then I can understand not wanting to be involved. There were quite a few state level employees that dropped out of the State Department as Israel's bombing of Gaza continued getting worse and worse under the Biden administration. And we reported on those resignations as well. There's a lot of people disgusted with Americans' foreign policy right now. A lot of people who got involved in these agencies with the intention of making life better, making life safer, making life more enjoyable for Americans and people abroad alike. And it's pretty clear, at least in the eyes of this individual who has seen some stuff over his 20 years worth of work, this is a bridge too far. And I have to say, I don't blame him for a number of reasons that we're going to get into a little bit later on in the program. But pretty interesting development here. That post that I just read to you is less than an hour old. As I mentioned, it's the top of the hour news is reporting. It looks like it happened right at 8:30. So definitely an interesting development that we will keep on your radar as we move forward here. With that, we have Anna's asking, is there a personal protection element in this? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that there. I wouldn't begin to speculate. You mean in terms of making sure that he doesn't end up in some kind of Nuremberg-esque trial on the other side of it? If that's what you're getting at, that absolutely could be part of it. She doubled down. He anticipates eventual consequences. Yeah, exactly. There is potential for that as well. A lot of times people don't do the right thing until they realize, like, oh, my goose is cooked. It's time to move on here. There's definitely a chance that that could potentially be why he decided to make that decision. But of course, I am not in his head, so I would just be speculating at this point. Okay, we will be getting into war talk here, but I want to start off domestically because for the first day, it may not feel like this is the case because we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks now. Hell, I was making posts on my Facebook page about it while I was in Thailand. Save Act deliberations are starting today, and thankfully, it took Democrats a while to get their butts in gear, but they are actually out in front on the messaging here. Even John Fetterman is out there saying that this is a no vote for him, not because he opposes voter ID, which I'd argue is probably going to be a detriment to any campaigns going forward if you can't get voter ID across the finish line, but because he, like most people following along with the SAVE Act, understands that this is not about voter ID. And I have a feeling these are going to be very short deliberations, because if the Republican Party truly wanted to get a voter ID bill across the finish line, all you have to do is make it a straight voter ID bill. But if you listen to this show regularly, or if you're new here, allow me to fill you in. This ain't just a real ID conversation. It requires enhanced real ID, which is only available in 5 states right now. It costs $50 to go and get another one, and requires a birth certificate, which 40 million Americans don't have. You can use a passport. 146 million Americans don't have access to a passport, and minimally it costs $130 to go and get one. You can use a military ID card, and you need your military record of service. While some of you listening do have access to that, I'd argue a majority of you do not, present company included. Government issued photo ID showing place of birth. 300 million Americans don't have that one. Again, I'm reading directly off the legislation here. This is what is in the SAVE Act. Meanwhile, people like gubernatorial hopeful in Wisconsin, Tom Tiffany, are saying, why don't liberals support voter ID? 80% of Americans support voter ID. I'm not even done yet. non-enhanced real ID driver's license, state ID, or tribal ID shown in conjunction with a birth certificate, which I highlighted 40 million people don't have, and that has to match your last name, which 69 million women do not have as a result of their marriage. Plus, they would need other forms of documentation as well that all are required at a cost. That is what the SAVE Act actually is. Now, I want to say here right now, I was receiving text messages to my personal phone as early as 6:20 in the morning with people asking about what's going to happen here. And I love the fact that I'm kind of people's go-to on this kind of stuff here, because I feel like I look at this with a level head, and I would never mislead or try and paint. I don't think any of you would accuse me of painting a picture that is too rosy for the path that we are on politically right now. I don't think that's in my blood. This is not going to pass. Or let me say this. It's not going to pass without nuking the filibuster. And if the filibuster were to get nuked, well, I personally have a contingency plan for that as well. But I don't think that's going to be what happens. Personally, we'll see. But they have absolutely zero path to 60 votes. If John Fetterman's a no, you're not getting any Democrats on board with what it is, because they know what they're looking at. This is a bill designed to make it more difficult to vote because, as we'll be playing later, the Republican Party doesn't care about the quality of the economy for the working class American. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, I'll tell you what, let's just we'll just do the sound round right now. To heck with it. This doesn't necessarily relate directly to the SAVE Act, but it proves the point. Here's Kevin Hassett, who's Trump's director of the National Economic Council. Listen to him on CNBC earlier this morning talking about the war overseas and what it's doing to people's pocketbook, and how blatantly he describes what's going on for the average American.
But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
It would hurt consumers, but that's quite frankly the last thing on our minds right now. That's what Trump's director for the National Economic Council is saying on national network news. Fake news, apparently, is what they're going to tell you it is. Unfortunately, that's not a deep fake. That is what he had to say less than 2 hours ago on CNBC. So the reason there's such a push to get the SAVE Act across the finish line is because they want to make sure that as few people vote as possible, because it is going to be ugly in November this year. I hate to break it to Republicans listening to me right now. There's a reason why the Wisconsin GOP is in scramble mode to find a new candidate. There's a reason why there is such a rush to make it so much more difficult, specifically for women and some groups of minorities, to be able to vote in this election. And that's because they know the trajectory that we are on. They know where we are headed. They know who feels like they are left behind. We know who's struggling right now, and they are trying to get ahead of it. And that is what the SAVE Act is all about right now. If they do nuke the filibuster, which John Cornyn out in Texas has suggested doing, because he's trying to win a bit of a barn burner of a primary with Ken Paxton down there in Texas. He has now thrown his lot in with nuking the filibuster in the name of trying to win some head pats from Donald Trump. Here's what happens if that takes place. Because I'll be honest with you, I believe that's Democrats' worst nightmare, but not for the reason that you might think. If it looks like for even a second that might be the case, the Democrats need to make sure they still win this election. And I would be using my platform to foster any type of group or agency that helps people find the appropriate paperwork in order to be able to vote in November in 26 as well as 28. Make sure you still win these primaries. Get the House. It's those betting sites have it at a 52% chance at this point that Democrats can win the Senate. And Democrats are more unpopular than they've ever been. And there is a more than 50% chance that they will win the House and Senate in November here. You make sure you win. And once that filibuster's nuked, you know what gets across the finish line? Medicare for all. You know what gets across the finish line? Increased minimum wage. You make sure. This would be the end of the uniparty in a lot of ways, assuming that the left flank can figure out how to win one more election with the deck stacked against them. I don't want to see the filibuster nuked, and I don't want to see the SAVE Act passed, because I know what I went through as a white American dude trying to get my birth certificate and my passport, and it was a pain in the ass. I can tell you from firsthand experience. But if it were to go this route, to a certain extent, there's part of me that's thinking, don't tempt me with a good time, because now I see an opportunity to get all the stuff that is popular with more than 60 to sometimes 70% of the American population across the finish line. And you're not going to be able to hide behind that 60 vote majority for the reason why you can't do it anymore. Because Lord knows Republicans will vote against any help for the American working class, as Kevin Hassett kind of stated right there, in terms of price negotiations for pharmaceutical or pharmaceuticals, or preventing any kind of gerrymandering that's out there, or preventing corporate gouging in the oil and gas industry, or in general. To be frank, it's out there. So I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture for why this is happening. Again, the reason why leftists like myself wanted to see the filibuster nuked 4 years ago was to reduce the price of healthcare. The reason MAGA wants to see the filibuster nuked right now is to make it difficult for women to be able to vote. It's not the same. The same outcome is championed, but the cause behind those hopes is not even close to similar. I hope it doesn't happen. I know this SAVE Act ain't passing unless you nuke that filibuster. So you're going to see some talk about it today. Let them know the facts. Let people know what you know. If you see it on social media, engage politely, of course. Nobody likes a name caller. Trust me, I've been told. But like, get out there and get the real information out there, because there's nowhere to hide. And as people running for office in this state will try and tell you, it's because Democrats hate democracy. No, only one party hates democracy here, and it's the party that's actively trying to make it more difficult to vote. Oh, and by the way, there's some something trans stuff in there as well to sweeten the pot. What are you going to do? Jerry says your Congressman Tony Weed supports the SAVE Act. Of course he does. Of course he does. There's no conversation about whether or not it's supposed to actually make sense, about whether or not anything real is supposed to come from this. It's that Donald Trump wants it to be done, and that, to be perfectly frank, it'll make it easier for Tony Weed to win going forward. Utah Senator Mike Lee is posting polling data showing the dire straits that the Republican Party is in right now, and says, this is why it's so important for you to pass the SAVE Act. That way we can prevent this from happening. No, the correct way to prevent this from happening is not starting a war just because Israel tells you to, and jacking the cost of everything up even further beyond the corporate greed that we've been dealing with for the last 5 years. That's how you prevent it from happening. The SAVE Act is an effort to try and to cover your ass after you know what's going, after you know you've messed up. Carlos says, will there be a primary? I don't know what that's about. Oh, you mean for the Republican Party? Probably in the gubernatorial race. Yeah, of course. Although I will say, to your point, Carlos, the limited time that I have had access to social media the last couple of days, once this candidate, who we'll talk about in the next segment, announced that he might be running, has kind of intimated it 3 or 4 times in the media at this point, right-wing media was out there saying, look, we've got a clean primary. This isn't your time. Pick a different time. Like, they're actively encouraging him. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not the equivalent of the party elites blocking a primary like what we dealt with in 24. But clearly, there's a lot of consternation about any type of competitive primary for the Wisconsin gubernatorial race, even though Tom Tiffany can't even clear 50% when he's not running against anybody, which should probably be a cause for concern. Kristen says, let's call the SAVE Act what it is, a poll tax. There's nothing in the SAVE Act that supports the agencies that are needed to process these document requests. 100%. It's not about expediting the the voting process. It's not about making it stronger. It's not about making it safer. It's about making it more difficult. And again, in a country where even the furthest right think tanks can barely find triple-digit examples of voter fraud over the course of more than my lifetime. It's just, you've got no backing for trying to propose this. Hal says, I believe I read the Save America Act also prohibits the use of ranked choice voting in federal elections. Yes, it does. Thank you for reminding me. Again, I don't believe Democrats want to see ranked choice voting just as much as Republicans don't. It's not like we're on the verge of getting ranked choice voting, but this would just absolutely kill that. It would absolutely kill any type of effort to improve the likelihood of third-party candidates being able to win an election or at least be able to compete in an election. David says, I haven't heard you say something trans for quite some time. Feels good to hear, like coming home. What's funny, David, is, and I doubt anybody will remember this because we all have the memory of goldfish, but like, just remember this the next time that there's a Democrat in office, because it's like critical race theory. Remember when every Republican couldn't stop complaining about CRT? When's the last time you've heard someone say CRT? It's not like it's gone. Like, it's still a thing. It's just that it's not in the news every single day. Something trans is the exact same way. The Republican Party banks on cultural issues, suckering people. And if you look at my Facebook page, I shared a picture of a billionaire pulling a quiver back, or the string back on a bow with an arrow in it, pointing at a conservative working class member, and the conservatives helping to hold the bow because, well, they'll something trans them into oblivion. The cost of living crisis has been trending in the wrong direction for 40 years. Do you know when it trends in a much worse direction? When there's Republicans in office. Then Democrats get in office. They don't do nearly enough to address the issue, while Republicans in Congress sit there complaining about caravans or transgender athletes or critical race theory or DEI, because they can't talk about the economy because they know deep down that the economy was trending in the wrong direction when they were there at a faster rate than it was under Democrats. And so they bank on those social issues. The reason you haven't heard me say something trans is because there's not some right-wing crackpot screaming about trans people every 40 minutes because there's a Democrat in the office. It's that simple. It's a matter of Republican voters waking up to how easily they're manipulated. They won't, but that's what it comes down to here. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about this mystery candidate. If you haven't heard who I'm talking about, I'm interested, for those of you that have been living in the state for a while, it's a familiar name. I will tell you that right now. And I'm interested what you guys think about this person coming out of the woodwork, but in true media fashion. I'm going to do it in tease form. So stay where you are, and we'll be back in just a little bit, and we'll jump into this governor's race here from the Republican side on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Shout out to the people watching live on the YouTube stream. And if you find yourself snowed into your home or apartment right now, you can check it out. Just go into the search bar, type at Ben Cominos. It's the @ sign Ben Cominos, all one word. And we're up and live there. I think I might just do this every day. I'm kind of enjoying it. I like trying to build the channel out. I got to add something outside of the show, but one thing at a time here. We're working on branching out here a little bit. Shout out to Larry, Jaro Manny, Anna Shadow, ILV. I don't know. It's so funny because it's not people's real names. Good morning to everybody, kind of conversing back and forth in the message there. So I ended last segment kind of teasing that there was a surprise announcement of someone considering getting into the race yet. It's not official yet, for the record, but it's been floated enough times in certain media circles that you at least have to entertain the idea. David in the text line guessed Ribble when I said that it was a name that would probably be familiar to a lot of you guys. And while that is a good guess, that is not who I'm referencing. It's actually former Governor Tommy Thompson has announced that he is considering getting into the ring again to run for office. Now, again, that's nothing compared to the 12 Democrats or however many it is that are currently trying to run for governor on the Democratic ticket. And there's going to be debates and some fiery competition. And I look forward to the Democratic Party, to Carlos's point, actually allowing a primary to happen and determining which one of them most fits what I am hoping to see come out of a governor here. And the idea that two people, or at least two people with enough name recognition, would want to run on the Republican side should not be seen as that much of a quandary. That's kind of the way politics has worked forever, is the way that this happened, is the way that this is playing out here. Here's the problem with that, though. And as I kind of highlighted here, we wait, what are you saying here, Brian Thompson? Old man who Voss can stand behind and speak through. Yeah, well, Voss will be gone by then, because he announced his retirement because he had to give prepartum care to women, and he got so sad that he had to take his ball and go home. But the reason why you see right-wing media kind of losing their mind a little bit about this, and I was reading them on Twitter writing dissertations about why this is a bad idea, and the last thing the Republican Party needs is a bloody primary, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstances, and we're going to be doing Iran talk in the 10 o'clock hour, but barring some kind of unforeseen circumstances, the economy is not going to be getting better by November. And that's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people are facing, present company included. I was hopeful, not optimistic, but hopeful that Trump trying new things might accidentally bring our prices down, that maybe he could rely on some of his backdoor dealings to be like, look, I'm going to give you a cut here, here, and here, but you're going to need to lower the prices here and here for everybody else. Like, that's the kind of shady government back dealing that I could have gotten behind. And there was part of me after he won that was like, okay, this is where we are. This is the way things are working. So here's to hoping that somebody that something good happens as a result of this decision. It's not going to happen. And I have some statistics that we'll do at the end of the hour to back that up. This war is not popular. And it was announced that another high-ranking official in Iran was taken out by government, by military operations. I haven't seen it confirmed yet, but that's at least what is being claimed as of right now. The bulk of people in America aren't going to care about this. I'm just going to be real with you. Some of you are going to pretend that Iran's regime was always on the back of your mind the entire time. Some of you are going to pretend that this is somehow so much better than anything Joe Biden or even Obama had been doing beforehand. And I'm going to speculate that some of you is going to fit into the 27% that's currently in favor of this war. It's an ugly situation to be in right now. And I'll be honest, if Trump were on the ticket right now, I still think he could win, because that guy's got an appeal that I'll never understand to that 27%. Donald Trump is not on the ballot, however, and he's not going to be on the ballot in any kind of meaningful way. His endorsement isn't going to get you where you need to go. And if gas goes up to over $4 a gallon, if groceries continue to go up, which if you haven't seen the trajectory diesel prices are on, it is not a promising sight. Interest rates for homes that had started to trend downward during the Biden years, but continued to trend downwards during the Trump years, are now going to start trickling back up again, making home ownership that much less likely again. And on top of all of this, the Wisconsin GOP has attached their wagon to a candidate that is not even polling at 40% in the most recent Marquette polling, when no one else, or at least no one of relevance, I can't even remember the guy's name anymore, but there was a guy that had 2% of the vote. It wasn't Josh Schoeman. It was another guy that I had no idea was even in the race. So that should sum up who that guy is. But between him and Tom Tiffany, they couldn't even get to 40% between the two of them, with 60% saying we're still on the fence about where we're going to go. We're in a very tribalistic world right now, and it's going to require whoever the Democratic gubernatorial candidate is to have a clear-cut set of principles and an agenda that they are interested in that they can convince other people, I should say, to get interested in. Because that's fundamentally what needs to come to a stop in politics. The Democratic Party put the kibosh on the government being able to negotiate for the cost of drugs in this country. That's why we had the watered down 10 drugs for people over the age of 65, is because they refused to allow our government to be able to negotiate in any kind of meaningful way. Why is that? Something, socialism, I think, is what they blamed. Okay, fine. You say that's socialism, even though every other industrialized country figured out how to make it work. Fine. What's your idea then? I'm waiting. What's your idea then? Nothing? Is the answer nothing? Because if the answer is nothing, then we're going to do something, because the cost of health insurance has gone too high. Kamala Harris, when she was running, suggested the government building 3 million homes and also providing $15,000 subsidy for all first-time home buyers. Now, I'm not in favor of the subsidy because, as we learned with health insurance, as we learned with college, providing a subsidy without providing a back end of how these different companies and industries are able to use those subsidies, not really my concern. Well, I should say, because they're going to just escalate the price even further for housing, then it's not going to nip the problem in the bud. The government building homes, however, not only would that work, not only have we already done that in America and it has been very successful, but countries around the world are also doing it and it's been very successful, including communist China. Now, of course, when Kamala Harris suggested this, she was referred to as Kamala the Communist. Okay, fine. What's your idea, MAGA? Nothing, right? You've got nothing. Donald Trump's answer was, oh, yeah, we're not going to do anything about the housing market because then the people who are currently in the housing market might see their prices go down a little bit past the astronomical increases they've received, and they're not going to be happy with me. So our answer is going to be to do nothing. Oh, okay, sit down and shut up then, because we're going to try something, because the path that we're on is just not acceptable anymore. I could keep doing this if you need examples. So there's a bit of a crossroads here in the Wisconsin governor's race, because it seems abundantly clear to me that the Republican Party doesn't have a candidate that MAGA can get behind. The only thing that Tom Tiffany has been posting about over the course of the last 24 hours is men and women's locker rooms, which is going to get laughed right out of the Myron Construction Studio as long as I am on the air, and not really addressing any of the cost that's associated with that. Tommy Thompson announcing his run is a very interesting one to me. He's 84 years old, or excuse me, not announcing his run. I apologize. Announcing his interest in considering a run so many times over. I'm not being sarcastic when I say it's probably about 4 times publicly he's announced an interest in running. Even if it's not Tommy Thompson, it says to me that there is an interest in somebody else who isn't Tom Tiffany. There's a lot of T's in this segment, guys. This is really hard. They're looking for somebody who's not Tom Tiffany. As Anna says, could we get one person under retirement age to represent us? He's 84 years old. Exactly. Larry highlights polling shows that on average millennials do not feel that either major party represents their interests or reflects their values, perceiving the Democratic Party as weak and the Republican Party as corrupt. You know, now that you mention it, that does sound about right. That's kind of the whole point of this segment here. Democrats need to have ideas and stick by them, much like Mamdani, much like what you're seeing in Maine with Plattner, and let Republicans do the hand-wringing about, like, oh, how are we going to pay for it, while we seem to be able to find $2 billion a day to funnel into a war that nobody asked for. Let Republicans say it's going to create bottlenecks. That's communism. That's socialism. Because guess what? If you decided to run on Reaganism, that would also be deemed as socialism or communism. Let me show you, to kind of completely tangent here, this is how Graham Plattner is talking right now about Social Security. And I've often lamented this to you guys before. I have highlighted that It goes insolvent in the early 2030s. Some reports will show you 2032. Some reports will show you 2034. It's coming, and when that happens, everyone's going to see an 84% reduction in the amount of benefits they receive. What the Republican Party is going to suggest to you is making my generation work 5 more years before they are allowed to collect Social Security. What Democrats' suggestion is nothing, because they want to act blindsided when inevitably the Republican Party proposes making my generation work for 5 more years. And the John Fettermans and the level-headed centrists will show up to vote along with Republicans in order to make my generation work for 5 more years. Here's what Graham Plattner is saying, and while he's running his race for Maine, beating the crap out of Janet Mills in every poll for the primary and beating the crap out of Susan Collins in every poll for the general. Let's listen to what he has to say about Social Security.
The ultra rich, they essentially hit their cap on Social Security sometimes just minutes into a new year. This year, Elon Musk hit his cap 15 minutes after midnight on January 1st. What's fascinating, though, is nobody talks about this. I've been told that I can't explain it because it's too complicated for the average person to grasp, but it's not complicated at all.
I'd have to agree. I've shared this story before, but the guy that tried to end my career before it started, when I told him I wanted to be a host, he says, "Ben, you're too smart to be a host. People won't understand what you're talking about." A, not only am I not that smart, but B, it seems like quite a bit of you guys have kind of jumped on board with the points that I'm trying to make here when we talk about this kind of stuff. It should be an election issue right now. Screw waiting until 2034. Do it right now. But you're not doing that. It's an interesting place to be in, because Republicans are so uniquely outclassed right now, but Democrats really don't have the fortitude enabled in order to push forward in a way that I think a lot of people want to see them do it. KG out in Houston says, an example of how biased voter IDs are here. In Texas, a concealed carry permit is accepted, but a student ID is not. Also, the deadline for a candidate to withdraw from a runoff election here is tomorrow afternoon. Isn't that interesting? That's absolutely biased. There's no other way to have that conversation other than from that perspective. It's a strange time to be watching this, just with both parties being so unliked right now, and you're watching it play out in my opinion, the most important electoral state in the country right now, that being Wisconsin. We'll continue following along with it. If Thompson makes an announcement, it'll probably be on my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok right after that happens. But I at least wanted to touch on that. We're going to have some time before we have to go to break here, so I do want to do one more 5 or 6 minute segment highlighting exactly how bad this wealth conversation has become before we transition into the foreign policy part of the conversation. We will do that on the other side of the break, so everybody stay right where you are. And if anyone wants to chime in, 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150, and we'll be back. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Stop me when you've heard this before, but the economy as it has been operating right now is completely unsustainable. I've kind of been the canary in the coal mine the entire time I have had a show. This has been going on quite a bit longer than that, but I think the effects of it have become more apparent now than they ever have been. The Financial Times posted a chart showing the share of the economy, who's doing the spending over the course of the last 36 years since 1990, showing the top 10% of spenders and then the bottom 80% of spenders, and where they both kind of fit in terms of spending into this economy. Because inevitably you turn on CNBC, you read a failing New York Times or a Democracy Dies at the Washington Post article, and they'll tell you $6 billion spent on X, Y, or Z to kind of float the idea that the economy's still trucking right along. It's just those darn young people and that avocado toast. And if they just stopped blah, 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 blah. You know, I've never had avocado toast. I don't have enough time to get into it, but this shouldn't shock anyone. I've never had avocado toast. Is it worth the price? Um, 50% of all consumer spending is done by the top earners. The bottom 80% is below 40%, and it has been not free fall. It has ebbed and flowed, but it has been on a downward trajectory since 1990. And you know what's interesting about that is it definitely fell during the Bush years. It fell during the Trump years, so on and so forth. But there is a pretty precipitous drop off during the Clinton years, right? Because in 1990, the bottom 80% was responsible for more spending than the bottom 10%. And it's been gradually changing ever since. But what's interesting about that is during the Clinton years, those are often championed as the most successful years, right? We balanced the budget, people were working in a bipartisan fashion, blah, 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 blah. Turns out that was when some of the largest drops in spending for the bottom 80% took place. Multi-percentage point drops year over year during the Clinton years. Never really bouncing back except for 2 points. Both under Biden in 2020 and in 2022 because of the social welfare that was available for boomers for most of their young adult lives being reintroduced into the system. And you saw the bottom 80% claw their way back into spending relevance again. That's according to the Financial Times. As I mentioned, there's a Democracy Dies at the Washington Post article out there right now on the editorial board titled, Hiking the Minimum Wage Puts Robots Over People. The third time won't be a charm in D.C. For the record, Amazon currently has 1.576 million employees. Jeff Bezos has already announced his intentions to make 600,000 of those jobs automated. So in other words, the minimum wage hasn't gone up in 16 years, and he's still intending to replace 40% of his workforce with robots. The idea that having to pay people more while they're currently employed by you is going to lead to automation is the biggest crock of crap that I have ever heard in my life. And it's coming from the guy that owns the Democracy Dies at the Washington Post. This administration isn't your friend. I'm not here to convince you of that. I am here to convince you, however, that things have been trending negatively since 1990, and you're just reaping what you've sown right now. And without an administration serious about fixing things, it's going to get worse. $21 billion funneled into the Iran war in 15 days. That's where your health care is going. Here I was thinking it was going to transgender athletes. We've got texts from Brian, David, and KG, and the YouTube line is bumping a little bit here as well. I'm going to scour those messages during the news break here as well. Check that stream out, as well as please do take part in the show as well, 920-281-1150. We got to get to a break for the top of the hour news, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that $21 billion being funneled into the Iran war and the way our bright-brained president is talking about it. Just a little bit. Outside the Box, WHBY, PVN. All right, we're back to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we've been kind of bouncing all over the place, talking about some SAVE Act, talking about some the announcement that it's nothing official, but that Tommy Thompson is at least kicking around the idea of entering the Wisconsin governor's race here, and the pushback that it's receiving from the Republican Party, mostly because they know the last thing they need is another hurdle in their way, given the way that this administration's been governing right now. And we kind of wrapped up the conversation, at least setting the stage for a conversation about the economy, again, with Kevin Hassett, Trump's director of the National Economic Council, basically saying it out loud. And I've noticed, I was scrolling some social media posts during the long break there. That clip has caught fire. And needless to say, it probably should, because in it, well, you know what? I will just we'll just do it again, because why the heck not, right? I mean, I think it's worth everybody hearing here. I didn't have it ready to go, but it makes sense just to play it. This is what I've been playing for people. The guts to say this, knowing that your supporters are going to blindly support you anyway, is probably all you need to know. But listen to what he had to say just a few short hours ago before this show started.
Is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
It won't hurt the economy. It will just hurt the consumer and the cost of goods, which is the last of our concern right now. That's not me misrepresenting anything. That's what the director of the National Economic Council said. Don't get mad at me for highlighting exactly what this administration is saying. They know the costs are going to go up. Now, before we get into this conversation in a more in-depth fashion, I want to read a couple of posts here. First of all, KG said, I'm going to have a major disagreement with you here. Expecting Trump's deal-making skills to benefit the average American is like expecting when you release a bowl in a china shop that all the shards will reform into a collection of priceless antiques. Look at his business record. The man bankrupted casinos. His real skill is walking away from bankruptcy with his money, leaving someone else to foot the bill. I think there's a lot of history that backs up your claims there, KG. I guess what I meant when I said that, like, I'm a firm believer with wealth consolidated as much as it is. Were there to be a progressive president who ran on, we're going to tax billionaires at a much higher clip, I think you would see a coordinated effort of the wealthiest Americans pulling their money out of the stock market to make it look like a crash. Much like how the stock market has been going up, despite the fact that no one can really point to any kind of real GDP growth outside of AI companies. And a lot of that is buoyed by some shady business practices. And yet our stock market, the last couple of days, of course, notwithstanding, is stronger than it's ever been. So I guess I was just seeing a guy who was going to make life so much less expensive for so many wealthy people, and that maybe there might be some kind of trickle effect. No pun intended. Clearly, that's not the case, and I don't blame you for a second for looking at things through the lens through which you do, because needless to say, your accounting of things is much more accurate compared to what ultimately has played out these last 15 months rather than what I was hopeful for. But as someone who didn't know what the outcome of tariffs would be, who knew what 95% of economists said, but I also know what economists said after we bailed out the banks in 2008. So I'm willing to give things a chance. Needless to say, there wasn't really a beneficial outcome for working class people. And David said avocado toast, never had it. Although I did have somebody in the YouTube stream who did highlight Jeromani said her 57-year-old husband just started eating it last year and he enjoys it. Well, be careful. You guys aren't going to be able to afford your apartment or your house anymore because of the toast you're eating. So be careful not to overdo it. I'm a boomer and I have lost track of how this economy actually works. By the way, David also says never had or watch out for the latte too. Interesting fact. The cost of coffee has gone up 127% since 2020, and it has skyrocketed, both in 22 during that big burst of corporate greed that nobody knew how to rein in because we don't have a government that works for us, and then again in 2025 because our president's a bit of a moron doing the tariff thing that I just mentioned a moment ago, and the cost of coffee shot through the roof. It's 127%. It's $9.50 per pound right now is what coffee is going for. In 2020, it was going for just about $4. But something trans athletes, right? Needless to say, there's a lot of frustrated people, and they are frustrated for all of the right reasons. Reasons that I've been highlighting for a while, and you can hear the frustration in a lot of people's voices these days, because there is a bit of existentialism with this, right? Because I, not for a single second, am pretending like the Biden presidency or anybody as of right now, it's early yet, but anybody as of right now has an agenda that they are laying out there that is actually beneficial, that is actually reining in the handful of oligarchs that have been screwing with this country for the last 40 years. And then the question does raise itself of who you vote for. And I get that feeling, because even like third-party candidates will get there, but it's going to take time. And the duopoly is going to do everything they can to prevent it from happening. By the way, MAGA, your Save America Act prevents ranked choice voting from even happening. So if you are somebody that understands that this Trump administration is selling you a bill of goods, but isn't going to turn around and vote for Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris, we're going to need ranked choice voting to be implemented. And the fact that the Republican Party feels so comfortable trying to eliminate it probably says more about what they think they can get away with right in front of you guys than it does how they actually intend to fix problems. Case in point. Do I even want to start with Cuba here? Let's start with gas prices. We'll get to Cuba in the next segment. Diesel prices, which the last leg, right? That's what everybody's talking about these days. The last leg of transporting anything is done with diesel fuel. Even if you use other types of gas to get things from country to country, getting from the final warehouse to the store where it needs to go is done on diesel fuel. 2 years ago, during the Biden administration, at this point in 2024, diesel fuel cost $3.90 per gallon. Last year in May, during the first Trump year rather, it cost $3.60 per gallon, a 30-cent reduction compared to when Joe Biden was in office. That's good stuff. A month ago, even, it was $3.65 per gallon. And since then, a week ago, it jumped up to $4.78. Yesterday was $4.98, and the current average as it stands right now is not exactly, at $5.05 per gallon. So we are looking at, from just last year, we'll just use Trump's term, we're looking at, what is that, roughly $1.40 increase per gallon on diesel fuel, which is carrying just about every single product that you could hope to want to buy. That's on top of the tariffs that were struck down, but the costs were levied against us nevertheless. And it's in conjunction with a reduction in so many other services and government programs that, if you're listening to me, maybe you lost access to over the course of the last year and a half. You know, I saw there was a 50% reduction in Alzheimer's, trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, a 50% reduction during the Trump years, while we blow $1 trillion hole in the deficit to give billionaires a tax cut. I realize that's not going to do anything for your cost of living crisis, but just to give you an idea of priorities and the way things have been working since January of 25. I mean, it seems pretty abundantly clear at this point. And moreover, I set this segment up with a tease in the last segment here. We're as of 15 days into this Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran, we're currently just crossing the $21 billion number in terms of the amount of money spent, unaccounted for money, mind you, because case in point, we did not know 3 months ago, we had no idea that we were going to need to dump $21 billion and counting into a conflict that we had no idea were happening. And had we not been embroiled in this conflict, and this is a legitimate question, 920-281-1150, had we not been embroiled in Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran, would there be conversations about spreading this money out to public schools? Would this money be included in some kind of package to make childcare more affordable? Would this money be floated in the name of bailing people out of a debt crisis that is going to strangle the younger populations if we don't do something to rectify the situation soon? You and I both know the answer to these questions already. This was never going to get proposed. They will cut access to services. They will cut taxes for billionaires, limiting the revenue. And then people like Nikki Haley come out of the woodwork and will start just espousing nonsense. Nikki Haley, direct quote, the U.S. just hit $1 trillion deficit in 5 months. Government spending at an all-time high with $425 billion in interest payments alone. We're collecting record revenue and still can't pay our bills. American doesn't have a tax problem. It has a spending problem. Did she get high before she wrote this? Of course it's a tax problem. You can't have record tax cuts without exploding the deficit. This is moron stuff, but she knows that because of the almighty R next to her name, she's going to get a reaction from people. And this is not me for a single second. I just highlighted $21 billion for a war of choice with Iran that nobody can clearly identify exactly why we're doing what we're doing. There is absolutely a spending problem. It's just not on the social programs that have existed since the 40s that didn't do anything to add to the debt and deficit. It's an incredibly frustrating reality to live in, knowing that that kind of messaging is going to appeal to 47% of the voting population. And I had a segment planned for this that kind of went by the wayside because I lost internet access for most of the day yesterday and couldn't put together the report that I wanted to. But a lot of Democrats are coming out now with tax cut proposals now, because Republicans are the radical right and Democrats are Bush-era Republicans, and there is no leftist party. But now they are running on tax cuts in our already cut-to-crap economy that we have today. There's no more room for cutting in this economy. It's going to collapse in on itself. But instead, we do not have an opposition party. And we have a party that is willing to spend money on war. I invented this saying, but not spend it on the poor. I'm joking. That's Tupac. And while we're on it, let's jump into Donald Trump and his schizophrenia in Iran and his intentions to take Cuba. We'll jump into that on the other side of the break, plus any of your thoughts as well. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Justin says, I drink coffee every day and the prices have driven me nuts. If I'm paying more, I'm just buying local offerings like Torque and Sheboygan. No, I feel that. I absolutely feel that. I've never been one for coffee, but I realize there's a lot of people who don't come to me if you haven't had my coffee or whatever the saying is yet. I totally get it. The prices are shooting through the roof here, and you like what you like. But also, and I know you get this, Justin. I don't need to lay it out. I don't need to spell it out there for you. But I've done the math before, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it here just off the cuff on the air with you. But I always joke. I'm like, oh, that coffee that you get there, that costs you $7. $7 a day. If you get that 5 days a week, that's $35 or $35 a week rather, which if you think there's 4 weeks in a month, well, now all of a sudden you're up to $140 a month there for how much you're spending on coffee. So you stretch that out over a year, and now you're getting close to, little over $1,500 a year that you're spending on coffee. So if you just stopped drinking that coffee for 10 years, you'd save up $15,000 and be literally nowhere near enough money to put down a down payment on a house. So just drink the coffee and tell whatever boomer you're talking to be quiet. But I'm right there with you, man. The cost is going too high. And again, it's brought about by A, corporate greed, B, supply chain issues that were real 4 years ago and absolutely have no reason to persist, and C, tariffs brought about by a president who really isn't taking things particularly seriously, but he's got people like Jimmy in his corner that he always knows won't be going anywhere. He wants me to keep going back. What were diesel prices during Trump 1.0? Don't pick and choose. People remember that. Worried about the $20 billion yet you make fun of the fraud in Minnesota? We need Doge to look at every giveaway. We got to get those transgenic masks, Jimmy. Which, if we could get Jimmy just as mad about brown people fraud as he could possibly be about white people fraud, Jimmy might just be an asset to have here. We just got to smack him out of that MAGA movement garbage and get him into the making sense category again. And I'd be pretty excited for where we ultimately ended up with him. And for the record, the $9 billion worth of fraud in Minnesota should be investigated. It was a certain percentage of it was being investigated. More of it should be investigated, and people should be held to account. Just like Brett Favre should be held to account for what he was doing. Right, Jimmy? Waka waka, Jimmy. Text me. Let me know your answer. Should Brett Favre be investigated for what he is accused of doing in Mississippi? 920-281-1150. Something tells me you might find a mighty white reason as for why that shouldn't be the case. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. Cynthia, Florida.
Cynthia, call me on a different phone. It's already a bad connection. So before you even get started, call me on a different phone. Doug says, watch your pennies and the dollars take care of themselves. I get your point, Doug. But with what's taking place in the housing market, there comes a time when the pennies don't matter anymore. And it's just a matter of a system designed to not be your friend. And that seems to be the system that that we find ourselves in today. And Sharon said, and I apologize for missing your email, Sharon. It says, do Republicans realize if the voting rights were enacted, many of their voters would not be able to vote as well? Look at the stats. That's in regards to the voting rights bill. I apologize for being late on that. I will say, I think the end goal is just have as little people voting as possible, because yes, there will be some Republicans caught in that nonsense, but statistically speaking, it favors Republicans more for there to be less people voting at the booth. Okay, so with that, I do want to switch gears here. If you haven't heard the clips yet, I'm not going to play the actual audio, but Donald Trump is talking about having the honor of taking Cuba. His words, not mine. As of right now, 61% of people oppose what's going on. 13%, that's 13% of people, support the idea of Donald Trump of the United States attacking Cuba. Among the support percentage, it's 30% of the GOP, 9% of independents, and 3% of Democrats. Now, it's pretty disgusting that 30% of GOP support attacking Cuba. It's a country of 11 million people. They are no military threat to the U.S., and their main export is like cigars. I don't know if that's racist, by the way, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. I don't know what's wrong with even that 30% of people that have that thought about wanting to support this orange man. I think it comes down to the cultist's gonna cult attitude, but mark my words, when any type of military action actually takes place, that 30% of the GOP will very promptly become like 86.5% of the GOP supporting whatever Donald Trump decides to do. But it's kind of surreal, because I even kind of called that we would end up here, because as someone who was very vocal about democratic wartime activities, and I stated, there really is no difference between fascism abroad and fascism at home, right? And I still believe that that is the case. But it really is telling that it's showing you how the Overton window has shifted in terms of wartime activities and the way that we perceive them as voters just over the course of the last 10 years. Because during the Biden administration, we had the war between Russia and Ukraine, where Ukraine was a proxy for America. And we had the genocide between Israel and Palestine, where Israel was a proxy for America, but we didn't have boots on the ground anywhere. Now the Trump administration has bombed no less than 8 countries, because we're adding Ecuador to that list now, has bombed 8 countries since January of 25, and has engaged in military operations in, assuming Cuba ends up going through, will now be 3 different countries where this has happened. And I could be blanking on one now that I think about it. But, and as an actual anti-war leftist, it really doesn't leave a lot of recourse for me, right? because I'm essentially choosing between other people that don't have red, white, and blue on their uniforms dying, or people with red, white, and blue on their uniforms dying. The only consistent part in both is that our tax dollars go to people dying and not to actually benefiting us in any kind of way. I'm going to play some audio of Trump. I see we have a call. It's probably Cynthia calling back, but I want to play some audio of Trump to show you exactly how out of it he is and how much his supporters just don't care. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben. Yeah, you're talking people not knowing why we're in this war. So this was stunning to me yesterday. You know, the PNAC wrote a manifesto in 1997 before the World Trade Towers were hit. And one of the quotes has always stuck with me: we can't make regime change without a catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. The creator of this group, PNAC, Richard Kagan, actually came out yesterday and said Israel is now a strategic liability. This is why we've been in all these regime change wars. And of course, his wife is who Obama sent to Ukraine to destabilize them. And I'm going to make the case, those two people and the people around them are the real reason we have rising anti-Israel sentiment that's being transposed onto Jewish people when it should be onto the Zionists. But he actually said yesterday, Israel is a liability after the damage they have the nerve to cause.
Yeah, I mean,
incredible.
It's hard to view it through any other prism, Cynthia. And I mean, within the Democratic Party, it's comparable to a cancer at this point, in terms of what it will do to your hopes politically. Now, granted, if every candidate is involved, well, you're SOL in that situation. But by and large, I think it's a fair assessment to hear. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of candidates in Chicago today that have not taken AIPAC money. And I encourage people, go through state by state. Whoever doesn't take any AIPAC money, kick them some money, $1, $5, $10, whatever you can afford until their election, because we have some hope here.
Yeah, I like that attitude. I appreciate the call, Cynthia. And Jerry saying some people think this is a documentary. Yeah. Oh, Team America. Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought you were going to post Idiocracy, but it's the same idea. It's the exact same idea. And there will be people that try and justify it to me. And they'll be like, Ben, there isn't going to be a war in Cuba. We're just going to murder a bunch of the people that live there, then take their stuff and put a new leader in there. It's not a war. Yeah, it's just gross and disgusting, and I don't want my name or tax dollars associated to it in any way. I feel like I'm pretty consistent in the way that I deliver on this show. All right, with that, I have some audio that I want to play for you guys here because yesterday, Donald Trump took part in a press conference, and I'm going to start and stop the audio quite a few times here because I would like to highlight that this is all within the same conversation. It's not like I went and found audio of Trump saying one thing 6 years ago and then found audio of him yesterday saying something different. Every piece of audio that I am about to play for you was said in the same conversation. Sometimes with the second example I have in the same minute. He said one thing, and then he's going to say another one of the things that I said. So listen to this here, and you tell me if we have coherent leadership right now. And this is coming from somebody who was willing to call out Sleepy Joe the entire time he was in office. Let's listen to our big-brained president describe why we've already dumped over $20 billion into a pointless war that nobody can tell us why we're doing it.
If we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've just known that for a long period of time.
Okay, now that what he was talking about there was NATO, saying he knew that when the chips were down, people will show you who they really are, and they're not here to help us right now. Let's listen to what he had to say 30 minutes later.
We have some that are really enthusiastic. They're coming already.
Oh, okay. So how about that? I was of the impression that he knew they weren't going to show up, but it turns out not only will they show up, but they're actively showing up as we speak. So, okay. People misspeak sometimes. Maybe he didn't realize the inconsistency. That's fine. How about this one?
This isn't need. Need would be one of the big boys.
Yeah, how is this need? We spend infinity dollars on our defense budget. We don't need anything, all right? There's not a single thing off the top of my head that I think we would need. What were you saying literally 60-second later there, Donnie?
If we need their mine boats, or if we need anything, any piece of apparatus that they may have because of a situation that they have, they should be jumping to help us.
Okay, but if we do need your stuff, you should be thrilled at the idea that we, the almighty America, need your stuff. We don't need it, but also the stuff we need, I would hope that you would send that to me. Again, those were 60 seconds apart. I doubt there's a third example, though.
We want them to come and help us with the Strait.
That is in regards to NATO allies coming to help us unblock the Strait of Hormuz, a thing the Trump administration is claiming they weighed as a possibility and didn't take seriously, as we are watching the cost of oil skyrocket directly as a result of a decision made by a sitting president.
My attitude is we don't need anybody. We're the strongest nation in the world. We have the strongest military by far in the world. We don't need them.
You know, now that I think about it, we don't need anybody. We don't need anybody to help us bail out the Strait of Hormuz. We know exactly what we're doing, and I don't know. I think I just lost my gumption there for a second. That is all within the same press conference, mind you. There's nothing this guy can say that's going to scare away the diest of diehard MAGA, and I'm at peace with that. It's disappointing. I can say, based on the emails that I get, the interactions that I get from people, they're like, you know, this show used to be a good show, but you just seem to have lost your way. It's people so stuck in a cult that they cannot see how foolish they look, still championing this man and the decisions that he's making, and the very obvious reality that he doesn't even know what he's saying. He knows he can say whatever the bleep he wants in any given moment. And then whatever he said most recently will just be what he sticks to in that particular moment. And 17 out of 20 MAGA supporters will end up supporting it. But we're sinking $21 billion into a war that he cannot appropriately define. And again, no short memory on the part of lefties, on the part of actual government accountability people, in the name of people wanting to see American tax dollars being spent on Americans and not the billionaires, the actual Americans. Remember how quickly everybody is able to find this money when you're being told there is no money to do the objectively popular thing. You can already see Ron the Swamp Johnson starting to run around saying, we got to find social programs to cut because this spending's getting out of control, while he's voting to cut billionaire taxes. It's not going to fly anymore. And it's part of why, even though I don't want to deal with the headache that comes after it, there's a large part of me that wants to see the filibuster get eradicated, because I think it would light a fire under a lot of left-wing, liberal, and lefty asses to go out there and make sure that they don't have the election stolen from them. And then, assuming a Democratic trifecta, you might actually be forced to pass some of the stuff that is so popular and has been proven to work in other countries that has nothing to do with making life harder for trans people or Mexicans. I hate to break that to you, MAGA, but I promise your life will get better with a lot of these policies. I remember very vividly saying during the Biden years that I hated the idea of $100 billion going to Ukraine and Israel at a time when so many people were struggling in America, and a lot of Republicans agreed with me. And I said, that's great, but if your agenda is we're going to stop funding the war in Ukraine so that we can give a massive tax cut to billionaires and still not provide any type of economic relief for the American population, that agenda is actually worse. And they'd be like, no, totally. We want to benefit the American people. And then at every possible turn, they sit there clapping for some kind of cut to a social program or some kind of platform that's designed to provide economic wealth to the American people, and cutting taxes for billionaires. And I just hate that my system of politics has been reduced to, you want to send your money over to Eastern Europe or you want to send your money to Elon Musk? Because those are the only two options. It's certainly not going for you. And if you suggest that it does go for you, we will smear you. We will claim that you're a welfare queen, even though the boomers are the biggest welfare queens on the planet. We will call you everything we want to call you, and we will do everything we can to stop that kind of movement. You think it's any coincidence? I played a clip of Graham Plattner in the 9 o'clock hour talking about Social Security solvency and the need to increase the cap on billionaires to make sure that it stays solvent. Do you think it's any coincidence that Democrats are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that he doesn't get out of the primary? You think it's any coincidence that Democrats fight tooth and nail to sink Zohran Mamdani's campaign before he won the general? You think it's any coincidence that Bernie Sanders got sank not once but twice, and then the primary was blocked the third time? You think it's any coincidence this stuff happens? Because it isn't. It's because they want to keep the duopoly between voting for never-ending war and cutting taxes for billionaires, or voting for never-ending war and sending 3% of that money to those welfare programs and 97% of it to the military-industrial complex. It's time that we start asking for more. My text lines are blowing up, but I'm going to squeeze one more break in here before we do it, and then we'll get people involved there. Anybody else wants to chime in, 920-281-1150. We'll have about 6 or 7 minutes to run through some comments here before we call it a show today on a Tuesday. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Just got a text on my personal phone that says I'm pre-approved for up to $250K in business funds. Hey, this day is looking up. You guys think I should click on it? What do you think? 920-281-1150. What do you guys think? You guys think I finally struck it big? Looks like old life's about to work out for your pal, Ben. It's a good feeling. $250K. Imagine what I could do with that. I've been looking. I'm getting ready to put together a home studio, and looks like I kind of missed the boat on that by a couple of days, huh? Would have been nice to have that set up yesterday. Although I also didn't have internet, so I really don't know. Really don't know what I could have done. Probably nothing. Probably nothing is the answer. But this $250K will go a long way. It costs like $500 to build a studio, so. Oh, what would I do with the other $249,500? No way to know, really. You know what's crazy is there's people that would do this. Like, that's probably why we're in the situation we're in, but whatever. Ben says, Ben was just jerking Cynthia around a little bit, saying, enjoy your summer weather. We're buried alive up here. Yeah, it was ugly. It was an ugly one today. Brian just posted a couple. Tammy Baldwin took $3 million from AIPAC. Glenn Grothman's at $300K. Ron the Swamp Johnson's at $2.175 million. Exactly. It's prevalent. It's everywhere. We got to chase this stuff out if we're going to keep it rolling. Hal says, maybe we can get the casinos back to running in Cuba. Give Las Vegas a run for its money. Well, you know, I haven't been to Vegas in a while, but I actually did a segment on this, and it's getting so expensive down there, and the whole draw. You know, it's fun. I think it's because they legalized gambling everywhere. So now, well, not everywhere. It's not legal here, obviously, but in a lot of places, it's legal now. So like other places are becoming like the riffraff gambling places, and then Vegas is like, if you really want to gamble, you're going to come to Vegas. But like the days of free drinks and $5 prime rib buffets are long gone. And you would think like it's a license to print money if you're anyone other than Donald Trump and you own a casino. So I don't understand why you would take the other stuff away. I guess you could make even more money. I guess that's what it is. Jerry simply says if someone is brainwashed, then by definition, they don't know that they're brainwashed. That's a fair point. I oftentimes state that I think a lot of ignorance or lack of intelligence kind of stems from an inability to understand how much you don't know about life. I think one of my greatest strengths as a human being is the fact that I believe I'm a moron and that I always feel like every day I'm learning something new. It's actually one of my biggest pet peeves with people talking crap on Joe Rogan, because people are like, oh, Joe Rogan must be the dumbest person ever. Look at him acting like he looks like he's learning something every day. Now, don't get me wrong. You're not supposed to go into interviews unprepared. But like I unironically say that I pursue every day as an opportunity to learn one thing new that I didn't know before that day started. And as long as I keep doing that, then I'm always improving as a person. And I think there's a lot of people who are like, just sit down and shut up. My country sucks because of transgender surgeries. And as soon as we get rid of those, everything will be all right. It's a simplicity in the problems that exist. It's like if I said just tax billionaires, no follow through, no historical precedent for why I think it makes sense, no game plan about how to rein in waste, fraud, and abuse on the other side once you got tax revenues back up. If I just stood here screaming tax the rich every single day without being able to back up the points I'm making or provide evidence as to why I believe that we have gone astray in our revenue generation here from taxes, it would be no different. But I don't know. I think you're right, Jerry. I think there's an element of you don't know you're brainwashed when you are brainwashed, and when you come to grips with what's happening, it's a matter of coming to grips with yourself. I do have an example of that happening in my life, but I don't have enough time to get into it. If I remember, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Justin says, this segment reminds me of the Steve Martin comedy, The Jerk, and I don't need any of this. I don't need this stuff. I don't need you, except this. Picks up the ashtray. That's all I need. Oh, and also this, and on and on. Yeah, that is, it really did sound like a pouty child, Donald Trump did he not? Like, we don't need him. We don't need anybody. It's like when a kid says he's going to run away from home and he like packs 3 action figures. He's like, I don't need any of you. And he walks away, and then he ends up like going to his tree house or whatever. And that's where he decides to move. And then like eventually he's like, well, I didn't bring any money or food. And it turns out I need these people for things. That was kind of how Donald Trump was behaving. I think, though, honestly, Justin, I think it's to lean into the segment of the population that actually believes that ignores the globalization of everything in society, and thinks that we could somehow go it alone, even though we don't produce anything. Kathy says, hey, Trump, declare victory and bring all our stuff home. That's a fair assessment. And I actually predicted that within 2 to 3 weeks, he will actually, not a mission accomplished victory, he'll actually leave and say we did all the things we need to do. And there will be MAGA people that call this show. They're like, see, Ben, you were doing this sky is falling thing, and for nothing. Looks like the war's over and we won. And I'll be honest with you, Kathy, I await that inevitability. I would welcome that with open arms. And Jim's talking about Joe Kent. We actually started the program with that, Jim. I'm very cutting edge on this program, but I appreciate the insight nevertheless. Joe Kent, who is he's the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, has suddenly retired over the illegal Iran war and everything that Trump has said about it. That's how this show started, and that's how this show ends as well. Definitely something to be inspired by, and I hope a lot more people kind of follow suit and recognize that none of us want this outside of the diest of diehard MAGA, and there's not enough of them to make this war a winnable enterprise here. So we'll see what happens, but that's going to do it for today here, guys. We have to get rolling. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the whole show, it will be up on the WHBY app or anywhere where you get podcasts. I have my own YouTube page at Ben Cominos, all one word. Go ahead and check that out. Please subscribe. It definitely helps me out. And it'll be available on Political Voices Network at 1 o'clock today. So check it out anywhere, and we'll be back tomorrow. Haley's up next, Outside the Box.